My father abandoned me before I could even remember him. For years, that act by my father, I allowed it to tell me a story about what I was worth. My own dad, my own flesh and blood, doesn't want anything to do with me. And I mean, he didn't just abandon me. I mean, we didn't even get a go F yourself or a Merry Christmas or a happy birthday or anything like that. He just walked out. That was it. Never heard from or seen from again. And that was his issue. But it very quickly became mine because I chose to see myself the way I thought he must see me. Now, I'm sure he didn't walk out because of an issue with me. I was a baby. I'm sure he walked out because of his own issues. But for years, I told myself a story that I'm not worth anything because my dad walked out. That is a horrible recipe for becoming secure. Why? Because you have to choose how you want to see you. Hey friends, how are you doing? I'm so grateful that you have decided just a couple of moments to tune in with us here today, where I want to spend a little bit of time talking about dealing with insecurity. Now, at its core, insecurity is something that I think every one of us as human beings wrestle with. I think that some of us wrestle with it a lot and some of us wrestle with it a little, but nonetheless, all of us wrestle with it to some degree. Now, what is insecurity? Insecurity at its core is uncertainty or anxiety about yourself. It's a lack of confidence. But part of insecurity is also the state of being open to danger. And when you are walking around in your life insecure, lacking confidence, being open to danger, something profound happens in your brain. Your brain goes from a place of safety and from a place of being properly calibrated and properly regulated to a place where now you're in a stressed, highly anxious state. And when you don't feel safe, what that causes you to do is to stop operating at your best. Now, let's just take a moment and think about that for a moment. We're all telling ourselves a story. And that story that you tell about yourself matters. Now, the story that you tell you about you is either empowering you or it's disempowering you. And when we end up telling ourselves a story about ourselves that is disempowering to us, what ends up occurring is we end up in a highly stressed, highly anxious state because our brain doesn't feel safe. And literally this impacts us at a biochemical level, like right down to our physiology, like right into our cells. Our cells end up in a stress state. Our blood ends up in a stress state. Our blood pressure ends up in a stress state. Our microbiome ends up in a stress state. In other words, we're not able to perform at our best, not because we're lacking intelligence or lacking in education or knowledge, but because that stressed state keeps our body and all of the signals in our body, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, in a place where there's an alert or a panic or a threat or a danger signal. And so we have to find a place to go from insecurity to security. We have to find a way to move from a place where I'm in this stress state and I'm all insecure and I'm lacking confidence and I'm feeling like I might be threatened at any time to a place where we have calm, to a place where we understand the power of being secure. You know what Yoda said? Yoda said, you must unlearn what you have learned. And so I actually think that insecurity is not a natural state. I think it's a learned state. I'm going to say that again. Insecurity is not your natural state of being. You weren't born into the world insecure. I didn't say that you were born into the world all sufficient. Of course not. Every baby comes into the world extremely needy. But being needy doesn't make you insecure. What makes you insecure is the way that you were treated as you were growing up. And so let me give you the three most common causes of insecurity. The first one is how we were spoken to. Now, words have power. And the power of words is that they literally shape the world that we live in. And so some of you watching this video today, you're insecure, not of course because you're a bad person, but because the words that were spoken to you were not healthy, they were not empowering, they were not the kinds of words that would feed or nourish or nurture your soul. You know, the ancient Egyptians actually believed that the seat of the soul was the tongue. And it was like a rudder that would determine the direction of our boat. Well, when you're in a position of authority or power, like a parent, like a teacher, like a boss on a job, your tongue actually can become the rudder or the direction for other people. Your word creates the environment or the world that other people live in, your words. And so when it really comes down to it, some of us watching this video here today, we're insecure because of the words that other people have spoken to us. The second cause of insecurity is how we were treated. And so we go from the words that were spoken to us to how we were treated. Now, when you think about it, this is all about touch and it's all about nonverbal communication. Okay, so how we're treated is very much shown by the nonverbal communication that we experience. And so if somebody is constantly scowling at us, if somebody is constantly looking down on us, if somebody's maybe even getting physically abusive or physically environment, I mean, how we were treated has a massive impact on our level of security. I know for me, it took me a long time to become secure because of how I was treated in terms of physical touch growing up, because of some of the abuse that I experienced. But the third thing that leads to insecurity is what we believed. What we believed. So I want you to imagine that all the things that were spoken to you, that's the first cause of insecurity, and then all the ways in which you were treated, that's the second, ends up going into this stew or this pot called your life. And that creates this stew in your belief system. So you got maybe a little bit of toxicity in the words, a little bit of trauma in the how I was treated, a little bit of abuse in the words, a little bit more mistreatment in terms of how it was that people were around me. And pretty soon I end up with this belief system stew that either empowers me or disempowers me. Now, here's the truth. You're not responsible for the pain that you experienced. You're not responsible for the words that were spoken to you. You're not responsible for how you were treated. You're not responsible for any of that. But no one else can fix it. So kind of what that means is, though it's not your fault, because it 100% is not your fault, it is your responsibility. And I'm not happy about that, but it is what it is. It would be far better if it was someone else's responsibility to fix me, but it doesn't work that way. So though I'm not responsible for the pain that I experienced, I'm responsible to take ownership and to become the person who fixes me. So how do I deal with insecurity? How do I move from a place of insecurity to security? In other words, friends, how do I become secure? Well, let me take the word secure and let me break it down into 6 things using the letters in the word secure. The first thing, and this is the letter S, is you've got to share your current self-worth with a safe person. Okay, so that's the first thing. In other words, I need to tell somebody what my current self-worth is. And that person should be safe, okay? This isn't somebody who's going to go on Facebook or an Instagram rant after, because that's not a safe person. A safe person is somebody who understands confidentiality. But listen, what's the power in sharing my current level of self-worth? What's the power in that? The power in that is that if I can name it, I can tame it. You walking around carrying the burden, and I mean this with so much empathy, you walking around carrying the burden of a low self-worth alone is not helping anybody. It's definitely not helping you. So if you have a low sense of self-worth or a very unstable sense of worth and value, that doesn't make you a bad person. But what makes it way worse is if you don't find a safe person to talk to. You got to be able to grab a friend, maybe have a drink, get a coffee, whatever it's going to look like for you and your buddy. And you've got to be able to say, look, can we have a real serious conversation right now? And just kind of watch how they respond and be like, and if they say yes, and it's kind of quick and flippant, then you want to ask them again. I mean, like really, can we actually have a safe conversation? Because I'd like to get really vulnerable with you right now about how I see me, how I'm feeling about me. And I'll tell you, you will find, so long as you select the right safe person, that this is the most transformational thing you can do. Because it's amazing when you put words to thoughts. All of a sudden now you see, because you just spoke the words, everything about how you're thinking. And all of a sudden it's like it loses like 50% of its power just in the share. I'll tell you what, I want to make a dare, and that's for you to share your current sense of self-worth with a safe person. But the second thing that you got to do, and this is the E, is you've got to explore how you got here. And so if I'm like sitting down with my safe person and I'm saying, it's not so great, my self-worth isn't so good, then the next question should be like, how did I get here? And I don't think this takes like a decade with a therapist. I think that some people need that, but I think for most of us, we know. It's maybe like, maybe our dad abandoned us. Maybe, somebody walked out. Maybe, we had a brother or a sister who was pretty abusive. Like maybe everything was fine in our early childhood years. And then we got into the school and the social environment and we were never allowed to feel comfortable in our own skin. Maybe we were different from other people, in obvious or not so obvious ways. And people use that to bully us and use those differences to make us feel like we weren't a member of the community, right? I mean, there's not often some deep therapy that is needed. Sometimes there is, but sometimes we just need to say like, how did I get here? I worked with a guy once who, he was very intelligent and had lots of capacity and education, but he really wrestled with insecurity. And so as we kind of explored how he got here, he had a memory that was triggered about how his parents always used to say, they would point to concrete in the sidewalk and they'd say, there's more brains in that concrete than there is in your brain, and that's what these parents would say to their kids. And so this guy, even though he was intelligent, he always grew up with the imposter syndrome. He always grew up second guessing himself. He always grew up wondering, do I have any worth? Do I have any value? He didn't need decades of therapy to uncover it. Now, some therapy helped him to recover from that. But a lot of the time, we just need to be honest. This is what happened to me. So, share your current self-worth with a safe person. Number 2, explore how you got here. Number 3, choose to see how you would want to see you. That's the third thing. C is choose how you want to see you. Now, this one here is so important because, I'll use an example from my own life. My father abandoned me when I was, before I could even remember him. I don't need you to feel sorry for me. This is just my story. It's happened to a lot of people. And you know what? For years, that act by my father told me a story. I allowed it to tell me a story about what I was worth. My own dad, my own flesh and blood, doesn't want anything to do with me. And I mean, he didn't just abandon me. I mean, we didn't even get a go F yourself or a Merry Christmas or a Happy Birthday or anything like that. He just walked out. That was it. Never heard from or seen from again. And that was his issue. But it very quickly became mine because I chose to see myself the way I thought he must see me. Now, I'm sure I've never talked to him about it. He's passed away now, very sadly. We never had any relationship. I'm sure he didn't walk out because of an issue with me. I was a baby, I'm sure he walked out because of his own issues. But for years, I told myself a story that I'm not worth anything because my dad walked out. Now that was horrible because I was letting the opinion of someone else, even though it was my dad, I was letting his opinion shape my opinion of me. That is a horrible recipe for becoming secure. Why? Because you have to choose how you want to see you. How do you want to see you? This is really important. You're not who your parents told you you are. You're not who society has told you you are. You're not who culture is telling you you are. Even your own culture. You're not who your teachers or your boss or your coworkers are telling you you are. You are who you choose to be. And if you want a hint as to how you should choose, here's my hint. How would you want your children to see themselves? If you had kids, how would you want them to see themselves? I'll bet you any of you listening to this right now would say, I would want my children to see themselves as bright, as beautiful, as capable, as strong, as empowered. And if you would want that for your own kids, then please make that choice for yourself. The fourth thing that we got to do, of course, the S is, obviously in that S domain is to share your current self-worth with a safe person. The E is explore how you got there. The C is choose how you want to see yourself. And then the U, that's the fourth thing, is to use boundaries and surround yourself with positive people. Can I make a statement that might be strong, but I hope you know it comes from the right heart? It will be very difficult for you to develop a high level of security if you continue to surround yourself with people who tear your security down. Okay? Like it's like literally psychologically impossible. So if I'm like, well, I'm insecure, but I choose to surround myself with people who are constantly putting me down, judging me, toxic towards me, trying to cancel me, then of course my level of security is not going to be very strong. So sometimes you got to use this thing called boundaries. And boundaries is when you say to somebody, look, I love you and I respect you, but this is unacceptable behavior. These are unacceptable things to do when you're around me. These are unacceptable things to say. And if you continue to do them or to say them, we're done. That's a boundary. Use them. That takes me to number 5, and that is the R in S.E.C.U.R.E. And that is, and this is so important, reject comparison. So many people find themselves insecure, including me, by the way. When I have moments of insecurity, it never happens in a vacuum. It's never like I'm all by myself in my daily time with God and just start feeling insecure. That never happens. It's when I go on social media and I start scrolling around and comparing myself to somebody that I haven't even met on the other side of the planet who probably has a way larger wardrobe and makeup budget than I have, right? And now I feel like I suck. And I actually don't suck. But what I ended up doing is I ended up engaging in comparison. You got to reject comparison because you are not anybody else. There is none like you. You are completely unique. There is no one like you. And so comparison is not helpful. It's not healthy. And it's certainly not holistic. That takes me to the last thing that you got to do to become secure, and that's the E. And this one here is definitely for somebody listening in today, and that is to enjoy life. I can promise you that your life is filled with moments where you can either embrace depression or you can enjoy life. Okay, you can either embrace the negative perspective, the unhealthy perspective, the perspective that's going to take you down a deep, dark pit, or you can enjoy life. In other words, maybe what you should start to do is practicing gratitude. Maybe you should make self-compassion a habit. Maybe you can even start to celebrate when you have growth, celebrate when you move forward. But rather than going through life like, oh, my life sucks, because I don't have this, and I don't have that, why don't you just be that person who just enjoys life? Sometimes you got to let go. Sometimes what you have to do to become secure is just to take your life and simplify it by having the beauty of joy. You know what? I'll tell you what, I've got a beautiful daughter and she's 9 years old. Her name is Jasmine. And I can promise you this, she's enjoying life. She's not scrolling through social media, looking at other people and trying to compare herself against those people. And she's not sitting there wondering why she's not this and why she's not that. She's enjoying every moment as it comes. I think there's a reason why Jesus said, learn from little children. He actually said, have childlike faith. And whether you're a person of faith or not, there's something about the principle of just being childlike in your approach, just enjoying life. So, hey, friends, if you want to become secure, the S stands for share your current self-worth with a safe person. The E stands for explore. How did you get here? The C is choose how you want to see you. And a hint there, by the way, is to ask yourself, how would I want my own kids to see themselves? The U is use boundaries. where needed. The R is reject comparison, and the E is to enjoy life. Can I just finish with one final thought? You, when you are operating in a place of security, are unstoppable. I'll tell you what, but when you are operating from a place of insecurity, it becomes very difficult for you to fulfill your destiny and to accomplish all the things that you know you're called to do. So can I encourage you today to go out there, to become secure, and to not allow yourself to be stuck in a place of insecurity anymore. If that's been helpful to you, would you go to certifiedflourishingcoach.com, check out all the tools, all the resources we have there. Please like this video, comment below, and share it. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll check in with you next time.